Welcome to our timely webinar, Federal Hiring of Career Civil Service Servants with Disabilities. Before we get started with this great program, I do want to take a moment to pause and to acknowledge what we all witnessed take place yesterday on our Capitol. We need time to process the emotions that we are experiencing, and I just want to recognize that. RespectAbility this morning put out a very clear announcement denouncing any and all such violence and behaviors. There's no space for this in our nation as we move forward. You can find the statement in our social media. Okay, so my name is Debbie Fink, and I am a white woman with long brown hair and glasses, and my preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am so excited for today, and before we get started and turn it over to Lou Orsling of ODEP, which is the Office for Disability Employment Policy of the Department of Labor, I want to go over some accessibility tips that will be placed in the chat box as well. For starters, if you're going to use the ASL interpreters, use the gallery view, click on the grid icon in the upper right corner of your Zoom box. For the PowerPoints for the ASL interpreter, use the side-by-side viewing. If you are using the captioning, go to the bottom of your computer screen and click on the CC, and the captioning will be there. And we'll periodically add these accessibility tips to the chat box. So now we are going to enjoy a short video that really brings voice to employees with disabilities.
There are 14 million people with disabilities ready and willing to work.
I'm a board operator.
I do audio description.
I'm a life coach, a speaker.
I'm a legal assistant.
I'm an executive in business and finance.
I'm a little person.
I'm also blind.
I am deaf.
And I'm a C4, C5 quadriplegic.
I'm an amputee father, an amputee grandfather. I'm a private pilot, and I'm a scuba diving instructor.
I am a team player. I live by the rules. I finish all my work on time. Never been late.
I find that being deaf isn't a negative thing at all. It's very positive, actually. I can see things from different perspectives about different situations.
I have autism, but my autism allows me to build Legos faster than people that usually could.
I need all my co-workers to treat me with respect.
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 RespectAbility.
So RespectAbility. I want to say, as the Director of Community Outreach and Impact for RespectAbility, that I've really had the greatest honor to get to know our panelists that are going to bring you such incredible information today. So now with this, at this point, I turn it over to Lou, who is the Director for the Employer and Workplace Policy Team within ODEP at the Department of Labor. Lou has really an incredible resume, and you can see the highlights that will be put in the chat box right now to learn more about him. And Lou, at this point, take it away.
All right. Thanks very much, Deb. Thanks very much for that introduction. And just so everyone at the whole RespectAbility team knows that, really appreciate the leadership demonstrated by today's webinar. As we are on the cusp of a new presidential administration, I believe really today the information that we share, the insights that we share cannot be more timely or important. As Deb said, I'm Lou Orsling, Director of the Employer and Workplace Team at the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, which is quite a mouthful there. I'm a white middle-aged man with round glasses. And just so that you know, I'm a person who has a disability and who's really been impacted from a very early age in terms of disabilities. And this experience, as many of you have had, really has fueled my passion for seeking solutions to the longstanding challenges that people with disabilities face and seeking life-sustaining work. And that's kind of what we're talking about today, right? Work in the federal sector, which is life-sustaining. So it's really my pleasure and my honor to moderate today's webinar with Allison, Kendra, and Oli, 3 seasoned and outstanding civil servants with decades of federal service working on issues of disability. Someone once said, civil servants are the vanguards of society. This webinar is designed specifically to encourage each of you to consider being a vanguard by working on behalf of all the American people through federal service. As we've just seen in the RespectAbility's public service announcement, the tide is and has been turning really for some time now. And it's increasingly accepted that disability is an asset in the workplace. We know your voice, your lived experience, your expertise spurs innovation and results in many other benefits in the workplace. We also know that civil servants with disabilities inform federal policies, programs, and initiatives to ensure these are inclusive of people with disabilities. No doubt you'll hear this again from our other speakers, but I just want to note here that the federal government continues to work to reflect all of America. This is echoed in the hiring goals of many federal agencies. Agencies are striving to achieve 2% of their workforce being people with targeted disabilities and 12% being people with disabilities. So really for all of you, for each of you, this is where the opportunity really lies. Now, none of us on this panel can promise that the hiring process will be perfectly smooth and will be challenge-free. Sometimes it's complicated, complex. But with the information we impart on you today, we think that with a little bit of finesse, a little bit of diplomatic assertiveness, if there is such a phrase, that we can all benefit from your passion, your unique perspective, and your skills at overcoming the many challenges that life has thrown your way. All of these qualities, I believe I can speak for everybody on this panel, all of these qualities are really essential for being empathetic and effective civil servants. And I'll end this morning or this afternoon actually with a quote Debbie offered during our last minute exchanges before the webinar. It's important that we all work together towards creating a more perfect union and a more inclusive America. With that said, let me introduce our keynote speaker today. Allison Levy is manager of the U.S. Department of Transportation's Disability Resource Center. Allison's impressive bio, as with all of our bios, will be placed in the chat box underneath each other's. While I've been aware of Allison's exceptional contributions over the years, and there's been many times when our paths have crossed, really this is the first time working with Allison, and I'm delighted to do so. So I really appreciated this opportunity and look forward to Allison's insights. Allison, I'll turn it over to you.
So thank you, Lou, for that very warm introduction. I'm very honored to be part of this group of folks today and helping to share information with you and the audience. And hopefully we'll give you some tips and strategies that will help you become employed in federal service. If you're currently in federal service, hopefully some of these tips might help you advance as well. So with that, let's get started. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give you a quick update. Some regulations were passed back in 2017. EEOC issued a final rule which strengthened affirmative action of people with disabilities in federal service. And the highlights of those are listed on this slide, and hopefully you all have access to these slides as well. I'm not going to read each of these slides as we move forward, but really want to kind of give you some high-level insight and feedback from my perspective. I am a middle-aged female, white. I have long blonde hair and wear glasses. I'm a person with disabilities from birth, and actually I'm in 4th generation hard of hearing in my family. It's a dominant trait. So I have been trying to accommodate my hearing loss, which has been progressive since birth, and have other disabilities I've acquired along the way. So I'm sorry, back to the affirmative action and Section 501 rule. I just want to bring your attention to 2 things. One, with affirmative action that Lou just touched base on. And if you move forward to the next slide, you'll see a little breakdown on what that is. So instead of hiring goals, which has been the norm in the past, we now have workforce composition goals. This means that we have goals to make sure that all of the folks in our workforce at all grade levels, that means all levels of employment, from entry level to mid-level to senior level, including senior executive service, we are working to ensure that 12% of our employees are people with disabilities, and that 2% are people with targeted or more severe disabilities. And as you use the slides that are being distributed, you'll have a hyperlink to what that list of targeted disabilities is. So this is an important change. Instead of just clicking a box and trying to make sure we have a certain number of people with disabilities that we're hiring, we want to make sure we're retaining this talent as well. So let's move forward to the next slide and you'll get a better idea of what I'm talking about. First of all, not only are we looking at bringing in more people and retaining people, we want to make sure we're advancing people with disabilities. So this final rule also includes 2 important points: that agencies provide sufficient opportunities for employees with disabilities to advance. And second, to make sure that we have specialized training and mentoring programs for people with disabilities. This has never been done before, at least not in a legal standpoint. Next slide, please. So if you take a step back, we've actually moved to an era in which we're taking a more holistic approach. We want to make sure that people that we're hiring stay in federal service, stay in our agencies, and have careers, not just jobs. We want to make sure, and this slide, let me describe to you, is really a cycle of the employment experience that everyone goes through. We go through recruitment and hiring. We have work inclusion and productivity. We have a stage of training and advancement. We want to retain people, and we want them to refer other qualified or highly talented individuals to come work in federal service. So we want to make sure that throughout this whole employment life cycle that we are including people with disabilities and that the experience is accessible. Next slide, please. So many folks have heard of Schedule A, and if you haven't, I'll describe a little bit more about it. Basically, it's a rule that allows us to hire people with significant or severe disabilities into federal service without competition. We call it a non-competitive hiring flexibility. No vacancy announcement is required. We can use Schedule A to promote and actually lateral people within federal service as well. There's a link on this slide to some sample Schedule A letters that are posted to the Office of Personnel Management's website. If you've never used Schedule A or don't have a letter yet that shows that you qualify for this non-competitive hiring option, you can use the examples that are posted on the OPM website and just share it with a medical provider or perhaps a service provider such as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, and they'll complete a letter for you that you would submit along with your resume or application for any federal job. For more tips and details about using Schedule A, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has issued Schedule A brochures and fact sheets called the ABCs of Schedule A for various folks who need to know more about that hiring option. And so that hyperlink is also provided in this presentation. Next slide, please. So who is eligible? I touched base on that a little bit. Really, there are 3 broad categories of people with disabilities who are eligible for Schedule A hire. The first category is a person with an intellectual disability. This could be someone who has a learning disability or a cognitive issue. So we're seeing more people with traumatic brain injury. Either they've survived a stroke or perhaps they've actually experienced a brain injury, who might fall into this category. There are also people with a severe disability, a physical disability or sensory disability. So a person who may have limited use of their arms or legs, a person with paraplegia. This also includes people who are deaf or have a severe hearing loss. People who are blind, who have low vision, may also qualify under that particular category. And the last category is people with a psychiatric disability. This could be a person with anxiety, depression, any of those other areas where a psychiatric disability comes into play. Now, just a little tip for you, when you apply for jobs, the hiring manager should never see your Schedule A documentation. That should stay in human resources. And it's usually the HR specialist managing the opportunity, helping the manager fill the vacancy, who sees that documentation, and they basically just check the box and know that you're qualified for Schedule A hiring. Next slide, please. So I'm going to really just bring things down to a very basic level and give you a few tips on getting started in searching for your federal job and launching, excuse me, launching your federal career. First, you'll want to identify what job occupation series are you in. You wonder, what does that mean? It's kind of a long word. Basically, you want to identify the areas in which the types of jobs that you want to apply for, that you're qualified to do. And the hyperlink that's provided in this slide will bring you to the Office of Personnel Management's website, where they maintain a full list and descriptions of the different job occupations that we fill in federal service. It may sound a little bit complicated, but believe me, this step will help you really hone in on your strategic job search in federal government. So when you've identified that, you also want to identify your pay grade level. If you've never worked in federal service previously, you'll want to try and look at the highest salary or pay that you've received to date. And you can go to this hyperlink in this slide where there's a link to the pay tables at, again, OPM, Office of Personnel Management. Find where you have previously, your highest pay that you've received on that chart, and it will identify the level, the pay grade level that you may qualify for, and perhaps the next pay level above that. So make sure you obtain your Schedule A documentation. You want to have a copy of that so you can send it forward with your resume via email or upload it to your profile on USA Jobs. And that's the last tip I have for you. Make sure you set up an account on USA Jobs. Upload your resume or use the resume builder within the usajobs.gov website and upload your Schedule A letter. Next slide, please. There are other ways to go into federal service. There are some other strategies, and one of those that I wanted to highlight today is not well known, but if you're a recent graduate, you perhaps haven't had an internship before, and maybe you don't have a lot of work experience, or perhaps you're in mid-career and you've changed your career path and maybe gotten some more additional training or education. Unpaid work experience is a program available through vocational rehabilitation services. So if you are a current client of vocational rehabilitation or VR services, you can ask your VR counselor about essentially being a volunteer intern in a federal agency. This would give you the opportunity to develop a network of folks who you know where you would like to land a permanent job. And it would give you the opportunity to get some experience. If you need additional training, say a specialized federal training workshop, it could be incorporated into your individualized rehab plan. And your VR office might actually pay for that, which is another bonus for any manager who may be considering you for a job opportunity. So consider the unpaid work experience if you are a current VR client. You might want to mention it if you're in a position where you could perhaps volunteer with a federal agency for a couple of months. Depending on your state, they may call this something different. But again, it's a way to get your foot in the door, show that you can do the job, network a bit, and get some more work experience to build your resume. Next slide, please. Another option, if you're a current or a recent student, is the Workforce Recruitment Program, otherwise known as WRP. This website is wrp.gov. It is an annual database of over 2,000 current students and recent graduates who have been pre-screened by federal employees, federal recruiters, and each person has a profile with their, most likely a Schedule A letter, with their resume, and a summary of their skills and rating of how the interviewer rated them. This program is highly marketed to federal agencies to try and bring in more junior talent or new talent into federal service. If you are currently a student or a recent grad, I encourage you to visit this website and find out how you can be included in next year's round of the students and recent grads in the database. Next slide, please. More and more agencies are establishing departmental or agency-wide secretarial level internship programs. In the past, there are a lot of different internship programs. There still are a number that are specialized in each agency, but generally there's been a push toward a departmental or agency-wide program. At Department of Transportation, where I work, there is the Secretarial Internship Program we call SIP. And this also is for current students and recent graduates. And there is a legal requirement for us to post this opportunity on the USA Jobs website. So once you set up your profile at USA Jobs, you can also set up a search option if you're a current student or recent grad, and it will actually make you aware of the job vacancy announcement when it comes up for the student internship opportunities. If you're interested in working for U.S. Department of Transportation, we do anticipate the summer opportunity to be posted in late January or early February. So I encourage you to visit the website, the USA Jobs website, and apply for the student opportunities. They're often called Pathways Program opportunities as well. Next slide, please. I also wanted to give you just 3 key names of people who can support you in pretty much every federal agency. Within HR, there's a person called a Selective Placement Program Manager. It's basically a long name or a long title for an HR specialist who is assigned to help with recruiting people with disabilities and helping to assist managers and encouraging them to hire more people with disabilities in their agency or office. The second point of contact I want to make you aware of is a disability program manager. Usually they're based in the Civil Rights Office at the agency. They generally oversee the reasonable accommodation process and policy. So if you have questions about reasonable accommodations, you can look at an agency website for their disability program manager contact. At the U.S. Department of Transportation, we're really fortunate to have a fantastic office, and yes, I'm biased, called the Disability Resource Center. We are seeing some other agencies that also have a centralized office that provides reasonable accommodation and support to applicants and employees with disabilities. And at DOT, it's the Disability Resource Center. So as you go through the slides that are sent to you, these are all hyperlinks to the contacts in DOT to support your efforts in landing landing a job within Department of Transportation. But do know that these resources are available in other federal agencies as well. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about my office. We do provide the full range of 4 core services to help ensure that we are supporting employees from the point in which they're being recruited to the point in which we want people to advance and we want to retain them. We also do some education and outreach to folks throughout Department of Transportation to try and make sure that managers and employees understand how disability is really part of diversity and how including everyone makes for a better workplace. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to leave with our contact information to make sure if you have any questions about employment at DOT And as you're applying for jobs and perhaps being hired into our department, you have a contact for requesting reasonable accommodations. And with that, I'll turn things back over. I believe we're saving Q&A for a later time. Back over to you, Lou.
All right, thank you very much, Allison. That was just an excellent, really look at all of the various pathways for launching the federal career. I really appreciate it. So comprehensive, so much appreciated. So let me introduce our next speaker today, Oli Cantos. Oli is the Vice Chair of Respectability, an attorney and a longtime career civil servant. Again, just so you know, all of the bios, including Oli's now, will be found below Allison's bio in the chat box. Oli and I have worked together intermittently for the past couple of decades. We've had some great opportunities to work together. I've always respected his work. He has such a deep understanding of the issues faced by people with disabilities and, of course, an incredible personal story. So with that, I'd like to thank Oli for being here, his longtime service in the civil service, and welcome him. I look forward to his comments.
Thank you, Lou, so very much. The admiration is mutual, and good morning or afternoon to all of you. I am a Filipino-American, middle-aged man, and my photograph shows me dressed in a dark suit and dark tie with a flag in the background, and I self-identify as a person who is blind. Over the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to be talking about the most comprehensive document that we know of that will be distributed within the next several weeks pertaining to employment of people with disabilities, and it literally covers everything from the beginning of the employment process all the way through the point of hiring. So with that, I'm going to ask that Jake can read the steps that are outlined in this document, and then I'll be talking about it further after that point. Jake?
Before we get to there, sorry to interrupt, but I see that our ASL interpreter has dropped off. So I want to make sure that we're being considerate of people who are relying on the ASL interpreter, and we're going to hopefully wait a few seconds, I think, to see if they can come back in.
So in that event, why don't we take a question or two that did arrive while we wait to continue our formal discussion. One question came up was, are all of the jobs in the federal government full-time jobs or are part-time jobs available? Allison, do you want to take that?
Sure, absolutely. I'll try and sign for myself if that's okay. It's a little bit tough to SimCom, but I'll try to fill in the blanks. So I would say that most positions are full-time. If they're not, it will show that on USA Jobs. But because positions are really valuable to managers, they tend to want to fill it full-time. So just for your information.
Great.
I would say yes.
And as we wait, Allison, thank you for stepping in with the ASL. Can you also please, I have another question while we wait. Okay. Given the oft-delayed response times associated with USA job vacancies, is there a process or particular contact in each agency for more streamlined consideration of people with disabilities?
So I should have been trying to interpret while you're saying that, but I'll try and summarize the question now. The question is there a better streamlined, shorter way to hire people with disabilities instead of on usajobs.gov? And the answer is yes. Schedule A allows managers to hire people without even posting the job announcement on USA Jobs. So technically, if you have a connection with someone in federal service, remember I mentioned the selective placement coordinator in HR for each agency. That point of contact should be able to help with connecting qualified applicants with disabilities with potential hiring managers. So that person's really your key contact. I can be honest with you, very often that point of contact is also very overwhelmed with their regular responsibilities of managing HR work. And often their second responsibility is to help with recruiting people with disabilities. So the reality is, if you know someone perhaps already in an agency who's doing the work that you're interested in also doing, it really is beneficial to network and communicate with that individual. If you know of any managers who may be hiring or who are doing the work that interests you, I would encourage you to connect with that person and maybe schedule an information interview and ask, you know, for just 15 minutes of time so you can interview them and learn more about what kinds of responsibilities or experience they want in any potential hires. So there are different ways you can be creative and try and make connections that may become job opportunities later. And again, if you have a Schedule A letter, you have the option to be hired without even waiting for a job to be posted on USA Jobs. And that also makes the process faster for the hiring manager.
That's great. Thank you. Allison, as we, can you please share?
I'm gonna interrupt again. Gabe's back in.
Oh,
I
good.
joined my phone, so
Okay.
I'm asking to start this video.
Thank you. I'll turn off my video.
Allison, thank you for stepping in there.
Thank you so much, Eric. And so at this juncture, I would like to ask Jake to read the 11 steps that are covered in the document that will be released in several weeks, and then we'll continue at that point.
Thank you, Oli. So I will read these 11 steps, which Maya will also be posting in the chat. Step number 1, learn about how best to work with people with different types of disabilities. Step number 2, enhance understanding of employment-related and other civil rights laws. Step number 3, determine the extent to which it is possible to receive services through vocational rehabilitation. Step number 4, make use of the assessment tools that will help refine career trajectory and strengthen confidence through exposure to successful role models. Step number 5, if on a college or university campus, bridge the gap between the career placement office and the office for students with disabilities. Step number 6, increase exposure to career options through facilitating job shadowing and hands-on career exploration. Step number 7, if on federal government assistance, learn about long-standing and emerging work incentives to facilitate greater economic independence. Step number 8, evaluate opportunities to work for the federal government, either as an employee or as a federal contractor. Step number 9, investigate nonprofit, private sector, or entrepreneurship possibilities and focus on benefiting businesses by providing them with important resources about which they may not yet know. Step number 10, increase placements through professional networking. Step number 11, help ensure retention by instituting and/or utilizing general workplace benefits and job accommodation possibilities. I will now throw it back to Oli.
Thank you, Jake, very much. Because of the limited time here, I just wanted to go over some general principles and then to invite you to a webinar whose information will be described later. And this is really an exciting opportunity for all of us to share. Long have I said for the past 30 years as part of the disability rights world that we have got to break down the silos that divide us all over the place. There are nonprofit organizations, for-profit entities, as well as government agencies at the local, state, and federal levels. There are people who focus on those serving physical disabilities, psychiatric disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and learning disabilities, and yet they don't all necessarily know what the others are doing. And so back in 2007, I set out to centralize all of the information that I knew of and could find in order to take people step by step so that if they did not know what employment resources were available in different sectors, or if they wanted to start and build their own businesses, that they would have an opportunity to do that. And as a result of that effort, where the document has been released from time to time, what began in 2007 and what has since been released several times has been an updated document that has a number of resources that cover all of these areas. And what has resulted by this point, and by what is to be put out soon, is that there are literally 300 resources that are in one document. And this is important because if you are, those of you who are on the webinar today, if you are a job seeker looking to find employment, or if you are a student looking for internships, or if you want to move into the entrepreneurial space, or if you support individuals with disabilities through your various organizations that you work for, this is the one central document that puts all of it into one location. And better still, we're going to be covering all of these 11 steps over an extended webinar that will be coming up. And some of the highlights with that will also entail discussion of people who may be on government benefits. A significant fear that some people have is that they're afraid of potentially losing their SSI or SSDI. But what we will go through during the webinar, as well as what you will see in the released document, is an exact way to show you numerically how you can retain the government benefits that you need and how you can still go to work and be productive economically and pursue your dreams in that regard. I literally will be providing you with the exact formula of how to calculate your benefits, as well as how and where to place your earnings so that you may continue to receive eligibility for those benefits, while ultimately, to the extent desired, weaning off of benefits if that is a goal that people would like to have. There are also other aspects of this that are of support to families, because as Allison has already mentioned, there are opportunities for students through the IEP process to incorporate internships with the federal government. And she also brought up individual learning plans, which are in existence actually in 33 states, but yet through the IEP process nationally, there's a way to avail themselves of that. And for those who are already in the workforce or who want to go to want to join the workforce within these various sectors, the wonderful opportunities that exist are just unbelievable in terms of the fact that there are literally hundreds of places where you can go for internships, to learn about resumes, to learn about government benefits and how they interact. There are also efforts that are documented in there about how to incorporate transition to adulthood. How do you advance? What is a language that is important in this context here for Schedule A letters that Allison also brought up earlier, as well as what are effective practices serving different disability constituencies, including people from the different populations that I mentioned earlier. And so in the interest of time, I want just simply to invite you to participate in that webinar and when you attend, you will get this full document that will have all of these resources. And when you receive these resources, I invite you to share that document far and wide to every person within the disability community seeking economic empowerment. Because when you do, you will also be helping to join efforts to make a broad-based and lasting difference in people's lives, because finally, at long last, the information and resources are all in one place, so you don't have to go all over the internet to try to find out what you can. And in through this approach, you actually will be able to walk through with the steps that Jake has read. You'll be able to go step by step to helping you to advance. And with that, I will now turn over time back to Lou.
Great, thanks very much, Ole. What a great recipe for people with disabilities really to find their life's work. And this is going to be a very valuable document. I can't wait until it's released and that we can push it out to others. Just excellent advice, no doubt, for the viewers that we have today too. So thank you very much, Ole. Our final speaker today is Kendra Duckworth, Shuck, who serves as the Program Disability Manager Disability Manager for the Equal Opportunity Policy Office of the Department of Air Force. Kendra and my relationship really goes back about 20 years. She and I served as consultants for the Job Accommodation Network. Kendra was my team lead and mentor for many years. So she and I have a really good, deep relationship, and I have always appreciated that. Again, Kendra's impressive bio can be found underneath Ole's in the link in the chat box. With that, thank you very much, Kendra, for your service, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Lou. Although I refuse to admit that I'm a middle-aged white female, I think you can probably figure that out based on Lou's introduction of me, but I am an individual with a visual disability. I have been the Disability Program Manager for the Department of the Air Force for over 8 years. And in those 8 years, we've been able to implement numerous initiatives and policies to improve the employment and advancement of individuals with disabilities within the Department of the Air Force. And I just would like to highlight 3 of those, just to invite individuals online to consider employment with the Department of Defense and specifically with the Department of the Air Force. So the first initiative that Air Force implemented over 8 years ago was we established what we call the Air Force Disability Barrier Analysis Working Group. And this is a working group made up of 5 teams for individual groups of people that it was established as a result of an MD 715 report where we had underrepresentation of certain groups of individuals within the Department of the Air Force. One of those are individuals with disabilities. So I am the co-lead for the Disability Action Barrier Analysis Working Group. And in the last 8 years, we've been able to implement policies that have identified barriers to the employment, advancement, and development of individuals with disabilities within the Air Force. One of our major accomplishments was to establish centralized funding specifically for individuals with disabilities to obtain reasonable accommodations so that they can benefit from training and development programs throughout the Air Force. A barrier that had been identified was that individuals with disabilities weren't being selected for training and development and career development programs because of lack of knowledge and information about reasonable accommodations. So we established centralized funding specifically to provide reasonable accommodations for individuals with disabilities so that they can participate in those career development opportunities. One of the other things we've done most recently is we've established what would be called, I guess, in private industry as an employee resource group. Since we're the Department of Defense, we call it a mission resource group because everything is about our mission. So we've established a Facebook group for the Air Force Disability Action Team that enables individuals anywhere. You don't have to be a member of the Department of Defense. You don't have to be an employee of Air Force. If you're interested in what individuals with disabilities are thinking about and doing and talking about within the Department of the Air Force, you can join this Facebook group. We have only been established for about 2 months, so we're still working on implementing our strategic plan, but the main goal of this resource group is to provide mentorship for individuals with disabilities, not just within the Air Force, but within the federal government and specifically the Department of Defense. So I believe we've provided the link for our Facebook group. I invite all of you to come and join us and engage in conversations regarding employment of individuals with disabilities. And then finally, the most exciting thing that we've been able to implement recently is what we call a Schedule A repository for the Department of Defense. We've talked a lot about Schedule A, and I think the one thing that we need to note is that Schedule A is a tool that hiring managers can use to bring individuals into the federal government non-competitively, and I say that with quotation marks, because even though it's possible to directly appoint somebody into a position using Schedule A, at least it's been my experience with the federal government, that that doesn't happen directly very often. More likely what happens is that individuals with disabilities may have to compete with other individuals with disabilities for those positions. And so what I've done in my 8 years at Air Force specifically is to try to encourage managers to use Schedule A as a hiring authority. It's not a mandate, and unfortunately, there's no requirement that says managers have to use Schedule A, but we certainly are encouraging them to do that. And one way to do that is to make sure that individuals who are using Schedule A are provided to hiring managers and that they're qualified and they're appropriate referrals for the job. So what we have done is issued on an Air Force website, airforceciviliancareers.com, and there's a link on the chat box where you can go and you can submit your resume and your documentation for positions that you have applied for on USA Jobs. And then that information is provided directly to the civilian personnel offices who are managing those positions that you may have applied for. So right now that we're trying to input people into this repository, so we're trying to build up the number of applicants that are within this repository. The most exciting thing about this repository was back in October of this year, the Department of the Air Force's main Manpower and Reserve Secretary issued a memorandum to all directors within the Air Force to say, one, that civilian personnel officers will refer all qualified Schedule A applicants from this repository to hiring managers for positions that they are qualified for and that you meet the requirements for. And also hiring managers are required to interview at least one Schedule A applicant that is referred to them for each position that they have open. So I'm very excited about this initiative because it helps get individuals through the door. As I've been a selective placement program coordinator in the past, and I get a lot of inquiries from individuals stating, you know, I keep getting referrals, but I never get an interview. So I'm hopeful that this will help managers understand that by interviewing individuals with disabilities, they'll realize that they are capable and qualified to perform these jobs that we have vacant. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into any further detail. The links are available. Also, my contact information is available. I'm happy to respond to any questions that individuals may have if you want to send them directly to my email address. And with that, Lou, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Kendra. So appreciate it. And this is the first of me hearing many of the programs that you've been responsible for launching over at Air Force, and I'm just delighted to hear. And hopefully these can be models and replicated throughout other agencies in the federal government. So fantastic, thank you very much. So now let's open the forum up for Q&A, just to let everybody know that you can either submit these through a Q&A box or through the chat box. I see the first question that has come up here how many openings does the federal government have each year? Does anyone, I don't know that answer. Does anyone, any of our speakers have any approximations of that?
Well, I would think the number is in the thousands. I mean, the federal government is one of the largest employers in this country. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities there for individuals with disabilities.
And I'll just add to that as well, that as we all know, many baby boomers are retiring. So I can only imagine that number would keep going up for some time. I know for several years yet, before the baby boomers are really all through and into the retirement system. So we have a few other questions here, and I'm going to start off with Oli. I'm going to ask you this one. When do I become a full-time permanent employee under Schedule A?
Well, when people are appointed under Schedule A, they're in for a 2-year probationary period, and then at that point, they can then transfer into more permanent status. And Allison knows this extremely well. And the wonderful thing here with regard to this is that, especially when looking at how Schedule A works, once people are appointed through Schedule A, it's critical to also build networks with other people within the agency in order to build a relationship, as well as to make sure to document your accomplishments along the way in preparation for the justification that will be used later for moving you into permanent status. And during the probationary period, that's still, especially at the beginning, it's still essentially equates to an at-will situation where you don't have stability in terms of being able to stay in the federal government. But as time progresses, that changes. And Allison, I'm sure you can build upon that.
Yes, you did a great job, Oli. Thank you. I guess it's a great opportunity to really emphasize that asking for reasonable accommodations as early as possible is really important, especially when you're hired under Schedule A, because there's that 2-year period of time when, as Oli said, you could be separated or, asked to leave federal service at will. So it's really crucial that you stay on top of what your needs are. Ask for those accommodations after you receive your job offer. Find out who your point of contact is for establishing your accommodations, and consider how quickly, ask a lot of questions about how quickly you can get that software on your computer or that assistive technology in your office or connected to your computer. Maybe even before you decide what day you're starting in your new job. I think that'll be really important to starting off on the right foot in your new position. So
And
just
Allison, if I could just add to that, I think it's especially important. I apologize, I just came back from vacation. It's especially important that veterans, if you have been hired to a federal job under a veteran's preference, especially disabled veteran, it's important for you to identify your needs for reasonable accommodation early on. Don't assume that because you were hired using a disabled veteran's preference that the reasonable accommodation coordinator or the disability program manager is aware of your need for reasonable accommodation, or even that you have a disability. That information is not shared with your manager or your supervisor. So it's important for every individual to take responsibility for their reasonable accommodation needs and make those needs known to the appropriate person within that agency.
Thanks very much, all three of you. Really appreciate those responses. Very comprehensive. I'm going to combine a couple of questions, and we're going back to the Schedule A hiring authority, and people are asking again, how does it start? Who do I contact? What's the initial process? Could someone field that?
Well, I can get us started. And Allison has laid out the steps in her slides, but especially for Department of Defense agencies, there is a list of all the selective placement program coordinators on the OPM's disability website. So that's a great place to start. Once you have your Schedule A letter in hand and you know what jobs you're applying for, you can reach out to that individual selective placement program coordinator and ask them what is that agency's process for hiring individuals under Schedule A. I think what's the most difficult part of Schedule A for individuals applying for positions is that every agency has their own process. It is not standardized through the federal government. So it's important to reach out to those individuals within the agencies that you're applying to make sure that you know what their process is.
Thank you, Kendra. I think that gets to the heart of this question, that each agency does have their own process, so that one has to learn that and go through that process. I'm rather new to the federal service, coming in late in my career, and there's a question that I'm not really familiar but with this program, but they're asking, is this program the same as 55-B/C program? Is anyone familiar?
I'm not familiar with that.
No.
I'm not either.
Okay.
But
okay.
If anyone wants the Schedule A citation, I think it's 5 CFR section 213.3102 part U.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Oli. I'm kind of thinking we have time probably for one other question. Let me just ask that of Allison. We have a question here. Should I use Schedule A more than once? What are the pros and the cons?
Oh, good question. You can use Schedule A as many times as you like. I was hired into federal service back in 2000 using Schedule A, and I've moved around in federal service using it as well. So you can use it as many times as you want. The same letter can be good for years and years. They never expire because your disability doesn't expire, right? Just know that each time you use Schedule A, you will need to go into that 2 years of accepted service, or the probationary period that Oli described. And then you will be converted after evidencing that you've met your job responsibilities for 2 years, and you get moved over back into competitive service. This doesn't affect your benefits. It doesn't affect retirement plan or the years of service that you have. It's just merely a tool that you can use to move around within federal service. And I would encourage you to do so as long as you're comfortable. I think once you're in federal service, I would encourage you to try and compete for jobs. Just kind of use your discretion in terms of whether or not you're willing to take a little bit of a risk to be in non-competitive service for 2 years over and over and over again, because you are a little bit vulnerable to being removed if you're not able to do your job. So I would say you can use it multiple times, but be a little bit prudent about how you use it once you're in federal service.
Wonderful, Allison.
This is only building on it real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just real quick. Some agencies, in some agencies, it suggests that you apply both for competitive and non-competitive service, so you can be considered twice. So that's just something that needs to be taken into consideration as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much for that, Oli. Thank you very much. I just want to, I'm certainly on behalf of everyone, on all of us, thanks very much for attending the webinar today. Much appreciated. Thank you very much for the speakers' insights and experiences. This webinar was certainly chock full of information to help you launch your federal career. Back to you then, Deb.
Thanks everybody for joining. First, a big thank you to Lou and Kendra and Allison and Oli. Really round of applause for what you brought to our audience. I just want to say, everybody, get out and start that application process, right? You should be energized right now, and we need you at the table. We need you to bring your whole selves to help us work towards a more inclusive America and a more perfect union. So everybody, please stay safe in 2021. Stay well, stay masked, stay social distance.
Deb, the webinar announcements too.
The webinar announcements are in the chat box. Please join us for our next 2 webinars. Thank you, Oli. The one we posted about Oli is on February 10th, Wednesday, same time. The Road to Economic Self-Sufficiency, a comprehensive step-by-step guide for students, job seekers, entrepreneurs with disabilities, and their allies. And if you don't want to wait that long, then join us in January on January 11th, Monday, same time, for a webinar entitled Pull-Driven Messaging to Achieve Positive Change for People with Disabilities. And we're talking about doing a next step to this webinar with these great panelists. And once again, thank you to the civil service that each and every one of you on the panel has been providing our nation. Go get them, start that application process, and please keep us posted. Let us know how it goes.